I started my Pyxis journey way back in November of 2024. And we have been pretty inseparable ever since. But as I'm sure most of you are now aware with the title of this video, with a heavy heart I must confess, I no longer own the Blackmagic Pyxis. The reasons I had to let it go are personal to me and are in no way an indictment of the camera. But for those who are curious, well, let's get into it. So I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I wasn't aware of this camera's limitations as far as the sensor was concerned. I knew the dynamic range was decent, sitting at 11.6 stops at a signal to noise ratio of 2. I knew the rolling shutter was around 25 milliseconds in open gate, and I knew that you would have to crop into Super 35 mode for any kind of slow motion. And of course, I knew that its low light capabilities weren't as good as similarly priced cameras like the S5 II and especially the FX3. The Pyxis simply can't compete with those cameras in terms of versatility. However, the more I thought about having the Pyxis as a dedicated anamorphic cinema rig, the more enticing it seemed. The setup I had been using up until that point was an S5 IIX, often paired with a video assist when I felt the need to shoot in RAW. It has the same IMX410 sensor as the Pyxis and with the same limitations, but my line of thinking was if I replaced the S5 IIX with a Pyxis, I would no longer have to use my janky video assist to SSD setup to shoot in RAW. I'd get a higher resolution in shooting in 4:3 anamorphic mode when shooting 2x anamorphic, and I wouldn't have to worry nearly as often about moire, considering the Pyxis is equipped with an OLPF filter. In theory, I'd have a streamlined professional setup that I wouldn't have to consistently worry about disassembling and reassembling. And plus, if I sold the S5 II along with the video assist, it would almost recoup the cost of the Pyxis. So why am I sitting here being filmed on the S5 II? Well, I'm going to start off with things that were not deal breakers by any means, but just little things that irked me throughout my duration of using the camera. First of all, I do not like this camera's implementation of BPU batteries. Comparatively, the FX6 has a battery compartment set deep within the camera body, keeping it flush and compact. On the Pyxis, the larger battery juts out awkwardly and has a ton of play in it. I then switched to a V-mount solution, and for some reason, Blackmagic designed the camera to where you can't run a V-mount flush with the camera body or you'll block the ports. So whether you use a V-mount plate or you get a BPU adapter, it's going to have to be set back several inches, elongating the camera to the point where it kind of starts to resemble the size of an Ursa Mini.
It's too long. It's way too long.
Another thing that was mildly annoying was that since they waited until after I sold the camera to finally release the Pyxis monitor, I was forced to use two separate battery sources for my camera and monitor in order to avoid potentially frying the SDI port, which just added unnecessary weight and cables to the whole setup. And lastly, maybe this was just a quirk of my camera because I haven't heard this mentioned by anybody else yet, but every so often when attempting to change lenses, the lever to release the lens from the mount would get stuck, preventing a new lens from clicking in place. So to fix this, I had to forcefully tap the lens release button until the lever eventually finally fell back into place, which is honestly something I've never experienced on any lens mount before. Now, like I said, none of these were deal breakers, but I would be lying if I said that they didn't annoy me and that some of these issues didn't lead to bigger problems, such as... I know, it's a box camera, but for me to actually overcome a lot of the issues I just went over, it was going to cost me a bit more money than I had bargained for. Starting with the Pyxis monitor, which would solve a ton of problems that I did have with this camera, so for $300, honestly, it's kind of a no-brainer. Now, I thought I could run this without a cage, but between none of the NATO rails being long enough to actually reach the top two screws on top of the camera, not having a place to mount a side handle when I was running an SSD, and the battery annoyance issues, for me, a cage would kind of be a necessity. So that's another $350. Also personal to me, I know that long term, I don't want to keep running cables to an external SSD. So a couple terabyte CF Express Type B cards, and now we're looking at another $400 or so. So all in, this would be another at least $1,000 of additional components, which once again, I get it. It comes with the territory of getting a box style camera. And honestly, $1,000 to solve 90% of my issues with the camera did seem like a fair trade. So what was really the issue? So often in this industry, and rightfully so, you hear the words, you choose the right tool for the right job. And the Pyxis is a camera that is suited to those who have client work, preferably with a team, also shooting commercials, music videos, and narrative films. I don't do any of that. I mean, not really. I don't have any kind of a network or a crew, and my fledgling videography business never really took off the ground due to what my lawyer consistently refers to as my socially maladaptive behavior. I mean, obviously I would love to shoot more serious narrative work in the future, but honestly over the last 6 months or so, 90 to 95% of the time that I'm pulling out a camera, it's to film myself. And I really don't need the Pyxis to do that. If anything, it's wildly inefficient to use the Pyxis for that. My S5 IIX rig gets me 95% of the way there at nearly half the cost. But the real reason I'm choosing to stick with the S5 IIX really comes down to the fact that I can strip it down and use it for a ton of other applications that the Pyxis simply can't do. Now, on its face, the idea of a $4,000 to $5,000 dedicated cinema rig sounds really great. But as someone who works a menial labor, blue-collar job for a living, me having one at this point in my life would just be a tremendous waste of resources. There were 3 main reasons why I was enticed to get the Pyxis in the first place. The first being is that Blackmagic is the only company that I've ever really had an affinity for. While other companies are switching to subscription-based models, Blackmagic continues to offer professional-grade apps and editing software for free. When cinema cameras were all costing tens of thousands of dollars, they were releasing them for a fraction of the cost. I really feel like they're an integral part in pushing innovation and keeping camera prices competitively low within the camera market. And I felt like that was something worth supporting. Voting with my dollar, so to speak. The second reason being is that, well, it's a box camera from Blackmagic. It's what a ton of people, including myself, have been wanting for years. It felt weird to yearn for something for so long and then to not buy it when they actually give you what you want. And 3, it essentially functioned as a symbolic gesture towards myself, signifying a celebration of past accomplishments as well as a commitment towards a hopefully brighter future. But after a long, hard look in the mirror, I came to a realization. There was never anything worth celebrating. There is no brighter future. I'm a 63-year-old man playing pretend in his mother's basement. The Pyxis was never really a camera. It was an abstraction, a dream. But that dream is dead. And I'm awake.
All right, you're free to go.
Wait, really?
Yeah, the plaintiff said they'll drop all charges as long as you promise to never set foot in Canada. You freak.
Aw. Hey, so does that mean I can get my Pyxis back?
Yeah, the plaintiff said they'll drop all charges as long as you promise not to, Oh, wait. Yeah, the plaintiff said they'll drop all charge. Oh my God. Yeah, the plaintiff said they're gonna drop all charges as long as you promise never to, set foot in Canada. Oh my God.
Farewell, friends.